Well, kia ora, good afternoon everybody. Happy New Year to those of you who haven't had a chance to say so yet. It's fantastic to be here at the New Zealand International Convention Centre and obviously to be able to deliver a State of the Nation speech where I'm laying up very clearly that this is a government that wants to fix the basics but also build the future, and we have this fantastic opportunity now to continue the work of good management and fixing those basics, but also actually to put an eye to the future as to how we actually step change the standard of living for this country. But with that, happy to take your questions.
Prime Minister, you did a round of applause when you spoke about the India trade deal, but you don't have New Zealand First support, so how are you going to get that across the line?
Look, as we talked about it before Christmas, we think there'll be support across the Parliament for the FTA. New Zealand First has had a long-standing position of opposing free trade agreements. They oppose the China free trade agreement. Of course, that's a $40 billion piece of trade for New Zealand now. So, the trick here is to think through in 5, 10, 15 years from now, when you see an economy that will be the third largest economy in the world, that will go from 440 million people in the middle class to 750 million people. That just represents a massive opportunity for New Zealand businesses. So we've got every confidence we'll get that passed.
Have you spoken to Labour about it?
Yes, and Todd McClay has, and you've actually seen positive comments from Labour, which we've appreciated.
Speaking of New Zealand First, you would have seen the comments that Winston Peters made when Dr. Anna Bremen supported the Governor or the Fed Chair. Which side of the fence do you fall on here? Do you support the Fed Chair, or are you with Winston Peters that the Governor should, quote, stay in her lane?
Well, look, I think the issue here is that the Governor was putting her name to a statement from many central bankers across Western countries, just underscoring the importance of central bank independence in a liberal democracy. She should have probably taken advice and also had a conversation with the Minister. I know the Minister has subsequently spoken to the Governor about that. But we as a government, I don't comment on domestic affairs of other countries, but equally I respect the independence of the Reserve Bank and I respect her independence as to what decision she may have taken hypothetically with that advice. That's hypothetical.
Can I very quickly ask the Minister just the tenor of that conversation, what you said to her, what she said to you in response?
Yeah, look, I spoke to her the day after she had signed the statement and I asked her why I hadn't been informed earlier and she put to me that she'd been reluctant to contact me at 3 a.m. in the morning. I said to her, look, I'm available anytime and that's what New Zealanders expect from me. So that I made clear, and I also did make clear to her that would have provided an opportunity to get advice from a range of perspectives. How that would have borne on her final decision, I don't know, I wouldn't speculate, but look, I think she's very happy that in future she'll contact me and we'll make sure that she has advice from across government.
Did she make the wrong call here?
Look, I'm not going to speculate on that, but I think it would have been appropriate, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs has said, for her to take advice from across government.
So was she out of your name?
Look, as I've said, she should have let me know that statement was her intention and she should have taken advice from across government. She's new in the job. I think she was being overly respectful of my private time, 3 a.m. in the morning, totally fine with me.
What would your advice to her have been had she come to the government first?
Look, I would have advised her that it was a matter that she should take a perspective from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on, that she should speak with the Treasury Secretary about.
Can you expand on what that position would have been? I mean, do you agree with what she said?
Oh, well, look, that's a question for the Minister of Foreign Affairs as to what the advice from that ministry would have been, but you will have seen he made some comments about that last week.
Doesn't she report to you?
Yes, she does, and it's appropriate that on issues of foreign affairs she get advice from the officials who are experts in that area.
But sorry, as to what decision she may have taken, that would have been a hypothetical based off advice that she would have received. But, again, what's very important here, as a government, we don't comment on the internal domestic affairs of other countries. That's entirely appropriate. We don't appreciate it when others do it to our own country. But as an independent Reserve Bank governor, we respect the independence of our Reserve Bank. It plays a critical role being independent on monetary policy in our own democracy. We've got to respect her independence.
Has she apologised for getting ahead of this?
Look, I didn't think an apology was necessary. What is important is that in future she takes that learning of making sure that she seeks advice and lets people know ahead of any international statements.
You said an apology wasn't necessary. Did she apologise?
Not that I recall, no.
Prime Minister,
Okay.
how are you going to be walking back Auckland's intensification rules?
Look, we've said very clearly before Christmas that we were monitoring the issue very closely. We wanted the council-run process to complete, which is actually an opportunity for Aucklanders to make submissions around the proposal that the council has put forward. Clearly, there's been a huge amount of feedback. Clearly, things are going to need to change in our response as well. And so, we said we've been very upfront about that. We're listening. And Chris Bishop will have more to say about that shortly.
So are you going over Chris Bishop's head here because this is the council adhering to his policy?
No, we've said very clearly from the beginning that we know this is a really important issue. We know it's a very sensitive issue. We need to let the council process run out, which is what has happened. We've encouraged everybody to submit. We've done that at a local MP level. I've done it in different media conversations I've had here with Auckland-based media. But ultimately, the feedback is saying things are going to need to change, and there will need to be some changes. And Chris will announce those in due course.
So how much, Minister,
Sorry?
Prime Minister, you mentioned in your speech that you didn't want the economy to be as housing-based as it was. Surely, to do that, you need more affordable housing, more supply. Why not allow 2 million new houses in Auckland? Well,
we definitely do, and what we're doing as a government is saying the way in which we have been allowing housing development to take place in this country hasn't made a lot of sense. We live in a country the size of Great Britain and Japan, with 5 million people, with lots of space, and yet we've had very expensive house pricing. What we have to do is be able to do a better job of master planning over a 30-year period of where we think demand and growth for housing will actually be, so that we can join that up and actually build the schools and the hospitals and the things that we need to do, and not get into this place where a piece of farmland then gets rezoned, ends up getting turned over into a subdivision, but it happens in an ad hoc kind of way. So I agree with you. I agree with you. We want to do a better job of managing the supply side of the housing market, which we think has been a big source of the challenge and problem that we've seen in this country. But as to how much densification happens and where it happens, that's really the conversation within Auckland. We believe very strongly in densifying over transport hubs. I lived in Sydney in the mid-90s, late 90s. I remember seeing what happened there with the transportation hubs, with dense housing and apartments coming in. We also need to open up greenfields. Think about what's happening down in Drury with all the development that's happening down that way. And then there's a balancing piece, which is about densification within the existing suburbs. And so that's the debate and discussion we're having, not a bigger one about we know we need to build houses in this country and we need to be very clear about that.
This is the third time that the government has changed its mind on Auckland housing, and it's already cost more than $13 million the previous two plan changes. So how much more money is this going to cost Aucklanders because you keep changing your mind? Well,
we've said to Aucklanders, we know it's a sensitive issue, as you would understand and expect. We are going to listen to the feedback. We're going to digest that feedback. It's clear to us that change is needed, and we're prepared to make that change. I don't think there's a problem when you actually say, I've listened to feedback and I'm going to do something different about it on the basis of that. I think that's a good thing. Sorry, Moni.
So that's at the end of the week. How are you expecting to
Sorry?
That's at the end of the week?
Yeah.
How are you expecting to be received by Ratana and iwi leaders and Māori leaders from around the country?
Yeah, look, Ratana I've always enjoyed. I've been going every year, I think, from opposition, up until last year as well. It's a great day. It's a great opportunity to sit down and have some good discussions and meet more of the broader community as well. So, we'll be at Ratana on Friday. Looking forward to it.
What do you think your report card will look like from Māori leaders?
Well, I think, again, you've heard us talk today, what do Māori want? They actually want to be able to have higher incomes. They actually want to be able to make sure that they feel safe in their communities. They want to make sure their kids have greater educational outcomes and opportunities in the future as well. So, what we're talking about is stuff that I know that Māori and iwi leaders are interested in as well.
Prime Minister, do you think that Māori Crown Relations is in a good place with the government?
Yeah, look, I mean, as I've said, I think to Mani before Christmas in our interview as well, is that, there's no doubt about it, there's been some real tensions caused by the Treaty Principles Bill. I acknowledge that. But what I've also done from day one is meet privately, some of you will be unaware, but with different iwi leaders, with my key set of ministers, talking about where we can collaborate and work together on. And so the work that we're doing in healthcare, on immunisation for under twos, the work we're doing on social housing, say on tariffs, I can think about the work that we've been doing about bringing Māori into infrastructure co-investment projects on the big planned infrastructure. Our Māori business organisations are some of the best in the country, and if you want to build and partner and build out infrastructure in this country, the logical partner would be an iwi partner. And so those are the conversations that we have behind the scenes. I appreciate there'll be performative aspects to it. There'll be But really at the end of the day, there's a values alignment about getting things done for Māori or for non-Māori, and actually making sure that there's good alignment around that.
Prime Minister, you declared that the economic recovery is here in your speech. What makes you so confident in that?
Look, I think, as I said to you, we inherited a turnaround job. We inherited a hell of a mess. We've worked incredibly hard to fix a lot of the obvious things that shouldn't have lost formation and should have been managed much better than they were. That's been a lot of hard work from Nicola, from all of our team over the last 2 years. But, you've seen over the last 3 to 4 months, when you see massive growth in dairy, red meat, horticulture, tourism's pumping, if you talk to our operators across the country, if you see the investment that's coming into the country, you think about the investment that firms are making now off the back of investment boost, the active investor visa program, there's really good encouraging signs there. You're seeing huge amounts of business confidence, consumer confidence, farmer confidence, and we've got low inflation, low interest rates. So all of that is saying we had a problem. We've put a common sense plan to fix the basics. We're now actually seeing leading indicators starting to come right, and many of you now are reporting on it, which is fantastic. But now we need that to be transmitted into that people actually feel that through the course of this.
What is that like for people
Sorry?
to feel? What's a measure of success for people feeling it?
Well, feeling like they actually have more money and more spending, that they actually, when you see interest rates and you refinance your mortgage, and you're coming in at a 4 or 5% interest rate rather than a 7% interest rate, and that frees up $10,000 a year for you on an average mortgage, that's $10,000 you've now got to spend on a better holiday or with your kids or saving or doing a renovation to your kitchen or whatever it is that you want to do. And that's when New Zealanders know that they will feel better off as a result.
You also mentioned...
Sorry, Mikey.
Unemployment is still at a 10-year high, so there will be many Kiwis around the country who don't believe that we are seeing that recovery, but essentially not fast enough anyway.
Yeah, look, unemployment is the last of the lag indicators that we want to see. We want to see unemployment coming down. As I've said before, when you have high spending, high inflation, high interest rates, a slowdown in the economy, and you get rising unemployment. And so the point of getting inflation, interest rates sorted, getting growth back into the economy is so that we can get unemployment and people into jobs. The good news is that when I look at something like the construction sector, which is the one that gets smashed around the most in a recession, you've actually seen, I think, a 30% growth in construction jobs through SEEK just in the last year, which is really encouraging. We're seeing a big step up in consents, about 20%. So, it's not here yet, but the leading indicators that, we're all seeing and we're all reporting on are actually really encouraging, and now we need to see that flow through.
There have been a lot of issues in the health sector. You also didn't mention housing in your speech, so health and housing, why weren't those mentioned heavily in the speech?
Well, I think I've only got 20 minutes and I'm trying to paint some pretty big, broad brush strokes as to where the country's actually sitting and how we're thinking about it. I agree, they're not unimportant issues, they're very important issues, but in the context of trying to explain the framework and the plan as to where we are on this, on this plan for New Zealanders, that's why I focus. Where I focus.
Prime Minister,
Sorry?
back on housing intensification, was there a lack of understanding by Chris Bishop and Nicola Willis before him about Auckland as the ministers who spearheaded it and both faced a U-turn?
No.
Prime Minister, you and Simon Bridges are talking about how to kind of navigate the world right now. Two options: keep your head down, stay quiet on your principles, or be really loud and proud about rules-based order. You said there was a third way through. What does that mean?
Well, I think you do both.
Like Greenland?
No, I think it's you do both. You have the courage to actually step up and actually, as I did call at the EU president to say, listen, tariffs is not the way forward in this world. We actually have these big trading blocks of the EU, the CPTPP, ASEAN. Why don't we get our trade ministers together to talk about how we continue to uphold the international rules-based system so we don't see a further breakdown of it within those big trading blocks? And they are significant trading blocks. Those three combined are probably 40% of global trade as a result. Well, that was our initiative, talking to Ursula von der Leyen, and it led to trade ministers in Melbourne having a meeting in November talking about exactly how we do that. So those are values that we stand up for, that we put voice to, and we make our case for. But equally, we also have to be pragmatic and practical and control what we can control. And what my challenge to us all today is to say, look, in a world of great uncertainty, in 195 countries, as I said in my conversation with Simon, we are incredibly well positioned, but we actually have to do the work on ourselves and actually build out a really great economy here at home, and also diversify our relationships internationally. And we've been doing exactly that. You've seen us put a lot of effort, and some of you have been with me on those delegations, because that's been very deliberate to make sure we have optionality and we have choice and diversification.
Can you be really clear on what you make of the US threatening tariffs for the EU because they don't want to allow Greenland to become part of the US? Are they a rogue state?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that the decision for Greenland is a decision for Greenlanders. It's a sovereign state, and it's pretty clear that they want to be part of the Kingdom of Denmark. The second thing I'd say is that tariffs is not the way forward in terms of we don't want to see a downward spiral of tariffs, and for tariffs it's just not acceptable. We want to see it's in New Zealand's interest to see a healthy transatlantic relationship in place. And actually we think through discussion and debate and dialogue, actually if the US has genuine concerns around Arctic security, we'll have those conversations. But tariffs is not the way forward. So we're pretty clear about it.
Can you be response?
Sorry?
Do you think the EU's response then is valid?
Look, again, that's a decision for them to make. For me, sitting here observing and thinking about what New Zealand wants out of that relationship, is we want a healthy transatlantic relationship. And tariffs is not the way forward. Discussion and debate is. They can work together on making sure that any security concerns in the Arctic are addressed together.
No more real big spending in the budget. In fact, you're talking about more savings. Are you predicting no lollies going? Are you saying it's going to be quite an austere budget coming into election year?
Well, I was just trying to make the point that actually what you want is good, sound economic management. You want the grown-ups in charge running the economy. And that's what you've had for the last 2 years. We've had some very difficult choices. We could have pumped and stimulated. We could have gone into hard austerity and put the car into reverse, causing more pain and suffering for New Zealanders. But we've found the middle road through that has actually enabled New Zealanders to be supported through tax relief, enabled our frontline services to be protected, enabled our economy to start growing again. And growth is ultimately what will actually set the course for where we need to go to. So, all I'm saying is that lots of parties are going to come out in election year and promise you the world. They're going to crank up the spending. We saw what spend more, borrow more, tax more did to the New Zealand economy. We've been dealing with the consequences of that as our government, and fixing the basics,
so
as I said.
So you expect nothing?
I'm just saying to you, you should expect good, sound, sensible, growing-up economic management.
And we set out our fiscal strategy very clearly before Christmas. We're committing to a tight operating allowance. That is the new discretionary spending that we will do, because we think reducing New Zealand's debt and getting the books back in balance is important. Now, the Labour Party seem to think those things aren't important. We think they are. But what we've proven over the past 2 years is you can actually manage a tight allowance while also investing significantly in frontline health, education and law and order services. And that's what our budget will do.
So it's targeted for 28, 29 or 29, 30, just to clarify and confirm, because there's targets and forecasts.
Yeah, so we're forecasting a surplus for 28, 29 and targeting one for 27, 28.
Prime Minister, how did that conversation go
So you want to beat the
down with
forecast?
Chris Bishop?
Sorry, Leah.
Yes, we want to beat the forecast,
Yes.
and we think that's eminently possible.
How did that conversation go down with Chris Bishop when you told him you were going to water down his housing intensification?
Look, I mean, it's something that he and I have been in actually a very dynamic conversation well before Christmas. Yeah, and we just, it won't surprise you, but in our government we actually talk to each other a lot and quite dynamically and consistently. It's regular, it's not formalised, it's not, we're just very open and transparent with each other. We all understand that it's a very sensitive issue here in Auckland. It's a very difficult issue to get right. It's a city of 1.7 million people. We need to make sure that we deal with housing, and actually we set this country up, and particularly Auckland, up for really consistent, good housing development that happens in a managed way, that's managed strategically rather than tactically as it has been, I think, for many decades. The way we've gone about it has been very different from how other countries of 5 million people do master planning. So we've said, look, it's a sensitive issue. Let's let the council run through their feedback. Let's look at that feedback and let's be prepared to listen to that feedback. And if there is genuine change that's going to be needed, and we're up for doing that.
Sorry, you're not worried about getting offside some of those MPs who have been touted as ambitious for leadership within your caucus?
Prime Minister, you also mentioned the inevitable rise of the retirement age in your speech. Is that something National is going to campaign on this year?
Yeah, I think we've made it a policy of ours over several elections now. We're just saying to the New Zealand public, look, over the last the election, the retirement age lifted to 65 in 2005. Since 2005, in 20 years, the average life expectancy of a New Zealand male has increased by about 4 years. So we already have increasing life expectancy. We also have the UK, Canada, Australia at 67 today. And we're also just acknowledging that's the reality of it, that we should move our retirement age from 65 through to 67. And so I appreciate at the moment there isn't political support for that. You have a Labour Party and a New Zealand First Party that don't think that wouldn't support that. But we will continue to make the case, because I do think it's one of the important things that we have to acknowledge. If other countries can do it, we should do it. If New Zealanders are living much longer than they have been since we last set the retirement age, that's perfectly reasonable, and it's not an unreasonable ask. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah, Prime Minister, was the United States right to capture Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro?
Well, firstly, we don't have a lot of time for Nicolas Maduro. As you know, the New Zealand government didn't recognise his government. We saw it as illegitimate. It's caused a huge amount of pain and suffering for Venezuelans. We expect every country to be compliant with international law. Ultimately, that's up to the US to make that determination. But what's important for us, frankly, now is making sure that there is what comes next, and there's an opportunity for the Venezuelan people to experience democracy. So, that's pretty much how we feel about it. Sorry?
Why didn't you make any statements at the time? Why did you leave it up to Winston Peters to make that statement? This is the first time you're speaking about it.
Well, because you've asked me, and I'm happy to give you an answer, but also Winston Peters, I thought, summarised the situation superbly well in his statement. I didn't see a need to add anything more to it.
Do you think that the US actions were appropriate?
Well, that's up to the US to demonstrate that they were compliant with international law. That's up to them to demonstrate that, as it is for every individual country to say that they're operating within international law.
What do you make of what's happening in Iran?
Incredibly concerning and worrying when you actually see a government using its own forces to actually kill its own citizens. Utterly unacceptable.
Sorry. Relationship building with Indo-Pacific countries, you didn't mention China. So what attitudes or strategy will the government take towards those superpowers in the world in 2026?
Well, again, as you and I have talked about before, we have a very long-standing relationship with China. It's been over 50 years. We're very proud of it. There's a huge amount of areas of expanded collaboration that's possible still in that relationship. Our trade between our two countries has grown tremendously just in the last 12 months alone. So we still see huge opportunity in relationship with China, and we still see a close relationship with China. We acknowledge, as I've said before, that we have differences in our systems. We will have differences, but as I've said to President Xi and Premier Lee, we have the courage to talk about those differences with each other, publicly, privately, consistently, predictably, and that's what we've been doing and will continue to do. So, the reality for when you're a small country like New Zealand, and there's 195 countries in the world, and 1 in 4 of your jobs are tied to trade, it's important that we can have constructive relationships with all countries that we want to deal with. It doesn't mean that we agree with them. It doesn't mean that we agree with, we have an issue with the US around tariffs. We're pretty clear. We don't think tariffs is the right way forward for the world. We've been very straight up about that. But we also have to be pragmatic and actually find a way to actually build the best relationship we possibly can despite those differences. Because otherwise, we wouldn't trade with anybody on that basis.
What do you mean by building out the future in your speech?
Sorry?
What do you mean by building out the future in your speech?
Well, what I mean is that, if you think about it, we inherited a turnaround job. We inherited a hell of a mess where we'd lost formation on just managing the economy and managing it consistently and well as previous governments had done. We took that over from the previous administration. We've done a lot of cleanup, we've done a lot of fixing, a lot of tactical decisions that we had to take to actually stabilise the show. But now we have this opportunity because, as I say, we have so much potential in this country, but New Zealanders work really hard. In fact, we work some of the longest hours of anyone on earth. But over 30 years, under successive governments of different colours, we've actually failed to actually create higher levels of standard of living for all of us. And that's why we've been very focused, not just on the sugar rush hits that we could put in place, but actually dealing with the underlying causes that drive to higher levels of economic productivity, where we can work the same number of hours but actually generate greater returns. And the way we do that is world-class education system, more investment in value-added products, infrastructure, red tape, trade and investment. Those are the big things that we know lift the prosperity of countries. And so that's what the opportunity is I'm foreshadowing and saying we're happy to take on the big conversations on KiwiSaver contributions. We're happy to take on the real thing that we have to deal with the RMA. It's the single biggest thing that's slowing up growth in this country. We're happy to take on the fact that, no, our kids are not at the centre they need to be at internationally compared to other countries, and I'm not having them lose to kids from other places and opportunities not come our way because we haven't done the job on rebuilding an education system. Productivity growth.
May I ask, what is it that you're still weighing up about Waitangi? I mean, you know it's coming. What is it in your mind, the pros and cons?
Oh, look, we just haven't had a chance to. We don't confirm those things until pretty close in, as is normal protocol. But I know it's an important day. We'll have a conversation about it when we get back together.
Received any invitations?
Yes. Yep.
What's the problem with the 2 million target for Auckland in terms of housing capacity?
Well, look, again, as I said, the debate is about where you densify the city. Do you do it in the CBDs? Do you do it in the suburbs? Do you do it in greenfield spaces? And more importantly, the mix of how you do that. And that's a difficult thing to get right. We should listen to the feedback, as I've said before. We're prepared to make changes, as we should be. And we'll have more to say about it shortly.
So you're not going to walk back the 2 million?
You'll have to wait until Chris Bishop, I'm telling you, he's working hard on it. He's been working on it for a couple of months. He will come forward with his views and explain that shortly.
The unitary plan already identified a lot of...
Sorry?
The unitary plan already identified a lot of suburbs, typically less rich suburbs on Ahana and Manere. Grey Lynn escaped. Grey Lynn is also seemingly the ones who are going to escape something like this. There's leafy, inner city, more affluent suburbs. Why do they not deserve densification where further away, less affluent suburbs do deserve densification? Because that's the current situation and that's what you seem to be going to.
Yeah, look, those are decisions for Auckland Council to make. But what I'd say to you is that I'm not sure that's the right assumption that you've just loaded into your question there. All I'm saying to you is you've got to get the balance right between CBD densification, what's happening in greenfields and how much greenfields growth you expect to happen, and therefore what's balancing is needed across the suburbs. I think that's quite a reasonable situation we can work our way through. We've listened to the feedback and in due course we'll have more to say about it. Mikey?
How reliant is your re-election as a government on the economic recovery?
Look, I think that's the thing that New Zealanders talk to me about each and every day. They know we've been through a very difficult and tough time, and for many New Zealanders it still is. But we're coming out of it, and now they want to know actually, that there is a pathway forward and there is a plan. We have been following a plan from day one, as I've said. We now are in a pivot point where we actually are seeing more and more of that data coming through that says that more of the recovery will be felt by more New Zealanders. I want more of them to feel it as we go through 2026. But we also have a huge opportunity, an exciting opportunity to actually build out a country that we know has got all this potential in it, and we haven't realised it. And actually we want people to be able to have higher qualities of life. Why? So they get more choice and freedom about what they do with their time and their money.
Do you think there'll be enough time for people to feel it before the election?
Well, we'll be making the case very strongly, and as you're seeing, as I said, we've been fixing the basics, sorting out and cleaning up the mess. We're now in a place where we've got an opportunity, and let's seize that opportunity together.
And elections are also choices, right?
That's something you said in your speech. You talked about the possibility of a dangerous miscalculation in the Indo-Pacific. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, look, I mean, I've spoken about it in different forums as well. You're seeing places like North Korea provide, munitions and weapons to Russia to fight in a war in Ukraine. You're seeing, we are part of a number of countries that work together, about 10 or 11 of us, to enforce UN sanctions against North Korea. We've actually lifted our resourcing in that space significantly in the last year or so. And we see, in all of that, there is a danger of a miscalculation that leads to a conflict or that we wouldn't want to see happen. So it's just making sure that we understand there's heightened tensions across the region, as there is in other parts of the world as well. And we don't want to see a miscalculation. We want to see people having diplomacy, using dialogue, having conversations about conflicts and resolving things peacefully. Because, as I said before, and I've said it and I said it again today, is that prosperity and security go together. You can't have one without the other in 2025, and we need to make sure that we have a stable environment. Okay, last question.
On stage you mentioned what turns you on and gets you out of bed in the morning. Do you think that RMA, NCA and KiwiSaver will do the same for voters and get them to vote national?
Well, again, I think what New Zealanders are excited about is that they know there's a great country. We all collectively want to make sure our kids and our grandkids have a great future here, that they actually have a better life than we had. That is the job of each generation before, is to make sure they set the conditions up for this country to realise its potential.
Are those policies sexy enough though?
Well, there's a lot more, Mikey, as you know. I use 3 to illustrate what I'm talking about, which are substantive reforms that fundamentally unlock a lot of potential for New Zealand, and that's what it's about. Okay.
It's also about the alternative, because actually, I'll tell you what was sexy, 100,000 Kiwi build homes. Man, that was sexy, was not delivered.
Yep.
We're a government that delivers.
On
Okay.
RMA,
Sorry,
you
yes,
mentioned
last question.
a couple of times that successive governments have delayed that. Labor did attempt to reform the RMA, so is your government also guilty of delaying that by...
No, a lot of attempts and a lot of talk and a lot of passing legislation in Wellington and not getting it done out here in the real world is actually a big difference. And so what we're doing is saying, look, we poleaxed Labour's last lot. We put in place fast track to put some defibrillators on the joint and to get the country moving and circulating. And now we're coming back with a fundamental rewrite of the RMA Act, and we're going to implement it very quickly, as you'll see. And that's also coming with local government reform accompanying it.
Specified having national ministers making those decisions. Does Simon Court not have a role to play, or by extension?
What I mean is you want our national ministers in there making decisions around national policy statements. I think that's the way we'll get economic growth in this country, and we'll make sure we stop getting all the red tape and all the conversations that we have with each other, but nothing getting done. We want to build things, we want to get things done, we've got to get infrastructure out the door. Okay, team, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.